Welcome back, everyone, and I think it's high time we paint a dwarf on the channel. And we're going to use this opportunity to start to play around with a few different skin tones. I've been using my beige red base skin tone for quite a while, but I wanted to experiment with moving away with the red tones, start to get a little bit more different colors into skin, greens, blues, other shades of brown, but today we're just going to focus on the brown. To begin with, on our 3D printed dwarf here, we are painting, base coating the skin with a mix of brown sand and beige brown. Next comes the paint wash, and we're using a mix of olive brown and burnt umber, a little bit of a darker brown and a little bit of green, adding that to the skin tone. The benefit of doing this as a paint wash is that we can add colors to our skin that may not necessarily work if we were trying to mix them in. So we can put any color on top of our skin tone and then blend it in later. Once that's dry, we can go back to our original base coat color and use that as a highlight color. Now, because the original color has been darkened by our paint wash, we do have to adjust this color slightly. So it may not be the exact same color that we're using with the base coat. The ratios of what to what might be slightly different. So you just have to adjust to accommodate for your wash. As we continue on the highlights, we are simply going to eliminate the beige brown from our mix and work with straight brown sand. So see, we don't necessarily have to add lighter colors to the paint. We can just simply remove darker ones. Since I'm experimenting with a new flesh recipe here, it does take adjustments, and sometimes you realize, well, I need a bit more shade, I need to go back and do this. Accordingly, so I realized I want my shade a little bit darker. I didn't want to take the highlights up as far as I first thought I wanted to. So going back with, once again, that olive brown, but mixing it with the darker camo black brown, gives us a little bit more shade wherever I need it. For our final highlight, we're using a mix of brown sand, elf flesh, and pale flesh. Yes, elf flesh on a dwarf. Urgh. I'm only showing you one time here, but I actually did this about 3 times. Since this is a new recipe, I decided to take baby steps. And I applied a highlight, which is a small amount of our highlight color added. Really didn't highlight anything, so then I had to do it again and again. Personally, I'd rather take baby steps than mix in too much and realize I over-highlighted and then have to go back. Time to add a little bit of color with some glazes to our skin. I really wanted to stay away from red colors in this skin project, however, couldn't stay completely away, so a little bit of very thin red violet placed in the recesses helps to liven those areas up a little bit. And of course, seems like it can never get away from this step. However, instead of gory red, going with scarlet red here, very, very thin glaze. Just add a little bit of blood warmth to the cheeks, nose, ears, and a little bit on the elbows and knees. Really livens up the piece, I think. Time to paint his skirt, and we of course are going to paint it like a kilt because all dwarves are Scottish. I'm using burnt red and black as our shade color, and then I'm going over that with straight burnt red. For our lines, I am painting those in using Game Color Heavy Green. And the key here is just keep them straight, and you do not want to paint the thinnest line possible. Give a little girth to it, because later on, we're going to be painting the thinnest lines possible. Once we get our vertical lines, we can connect the dots by adding our horizontal stripes. And see how big this pattern I'm painting is? It's going to be easier to see. It's going to be more visually impactful with just a few broad brush strokes rather than a dozen tiny little lines that you can't see from any distance greater than 6 inches. So once that's dry, now we break out our teeny tiny brush and use our highlight color by mixing in a little bit of dead flesh to our heavy green and paint lines within our lines. So that'll give these lighter green lines color depth because they're going to be in the middle of that darker heavy green color. Once the lines are established, we can go ahead and highlight the red portions of our kilt. Could have done that beforehand, but a lot of it's going to get painted over anyway, so decided just to wait. There's only a few folds in this kilt anyway, so it's easier to do at this stage. For the hair, we are going to go with what I call anime black, which basically means blue. Starting off with the black underbase, we are going to give it a base coat of dark Prussian blue. And then from there, we are going to add some steel blue for our first highlight, and then a very small drop of white for our final highlight. Since we use so many interesting color combinations on this dwarf so far, might as well continue that with the axes. We're going to begin with a base coat of Vallejo Model Air steel, and basically this is our highlight. Everything that we apply from this point on is going to be a shade color. Our first coat is a thin wash of green and blue ink mixed. I recently found out that green added to steel gives it a very earthy color. Works very well, especially with dwarves. And the blue is what I normally use for steel if I'm using an ink wash. Our second wash is straight blue ink. This is a little bit, just a little bit thicker than what we used previously. You can see we are applying it in specific areas where I want a little bit more shade. So we're going to leave that greenish blue color on the larger portions and just concentrate on the recesses here. And the last thing is black ink thinned once again a little bit. And this is to add our shadow areas where I want it much darker. I wanted to find that little engraved edge on the inside of the axes. Any of the bottom side areas, we can add a little bit of shadow there wherever needed. Once this is dry, we can go back to our original steel color and reapply it if needed anywhere to clean up any of the edge work. And there we go, one finished dwarf bushwhacker. This was a very experimental piece. I wanted to try something new with skin tone, and it came out fairly good. I'm very happy with it, which is, it's very difficult coming up with new recipes for skin tones because making them look good and realistic is the hardest part with skin. Cloth, metal, you can do whatever you want. Skin's a little different. Then we got a nice, simple, easy to see pattern, kilt pattern on the skirt. No need to Jackson Pollock it with a whole bunch of dozens of tiny little lines. We can see it easily from here, which is good. We got the hair, which really stands out, and getting a little experimental with the axes, relying completely on ink washes just to shade our original steel base coat. So lots of new things experimented with here. A lot of it worked out, thankfully. Doesn't always work out, but you know what? That's how you learn. You learn just as much from what works as from what doesn't work. So grab your paints, start painting, experiment with new colors, and see what happens. Good luck. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
What's that, a man? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, believe it or not, yep.